Okay, good morning or good afternoon for most of you, I guess. Welcome to another fantastic webinar we have planned for you today in this embedded finance series from Engine and MoneyLion. My name is Peter Renton. I am the CEO and founder of Renton & Co., formerly the chairman of FinTech Nexus, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's session. And we are talking about embedded finance and how it is powering a frictionless financial shopping experience. And we're going to get into that in a lot of detail because as consumers, we are all consumers, we all shop online, and we are all used to the fantastic experience that Amazon pioneered where things happen very quickly, just one or two clicks. And what we're trying to do is see how financial services can take the lessons learned from retail and bring it into the user experience for financial products. It's not easy. There's a lot of challenges. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how we're going to get to that the holy grail of sort of that more frictionless one or two click experience. So with that, I would love to introduce our panelists. So why don't we go first over to you, John?
Sure. Well, thank you, Peter. I'm delighted to be here. And my name is John Kaplan. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at MoneyLion.
Okay, just tell us a little bit, as you do your introductions, tell a little bit about what your focus is in your day-to-day.
Sure. Well, I help our enterprise partners, both providers of products as well as uh, marketplaces that want to build new experiences that would include those products. I help both sides of that equation uh, get more distribution for their products and create a better experience if you're hosting one of these marketplaces for your existing customers.
Okay, thanks, John. Tyra?
Hi. So, Peter, it's great to be on. Thrilled to be here today. Tyra Hall, I'm the head of enterprise payments at Citizens. And the way to think about my role is I'm really responsible for all the core payment rails across the bank, as well as thinking about new areas of growth for us in specific segments. So, we support consumer, small business, private bank, wealth, and commercial. So, big group of customers within that base. And we're figuring out new ways to bring innovative capabilities and solutions to those customers, and also leading a lot of our embedded finance work as well.
Okay, thank you, Tyra. Mark?
Thanks, Peter. Great to be here today, all. Mark Valentino. I am the president of business banking at Citizens. Our division of Citizens essentially provides banking services for companies for that startup level, $0 in revenue, all the way up to $50 million in revenue. So a pretty wide swath of the economy there covered by our banking division. We also work closely with our commercial bank on the larger end, and we actually work very closely with our newly launched private bank for our business owners for their personal banking needs as well.
Okay, great. So what we're going to do before we really get into the webinar is we have a polling question that I'm just going to put up here. And what I'd like to do is for those who have joined us today, thank you very much. If you could just take a little bit of time and tell us where you fit, where you see the financial industry as far as delivering seamless digital customer experiences. So if you could just take a few minutes, we're getting some people coming in here now. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to leave that poll up while we get into our first question of the day. And that really, I'd like to maybe start with you, Mark, if I could. So the crux of this whole webinar here is, can financial services deliver the same frictionless shopping experiences that consumers have come to expect at retail? What do you say to that?
I'm not going to give away my answer to what I think the poll question would be from my perspective, but what I can say is I think we can get there, Peter, as an industry overall, and I think we've made very, very large strides over the last kind of 3 to 5 years. Still some work to be done, in my opinion. mainly because, some of the kind of consumer-oriented retailers, for example, you mentioned retailers, I think set the standards in terms of kind of that experience. And so it wasn't set necessarily by our industry, although I do think our industry aspires to kind of get to that kind of state of nirvana. And we talk about it a lot internally at Citizens. I know it's talked a lot about at other institutions as well. You have to be able to provide excellent customer experience no matter where the customer is in their journey, whether that means they're walking into a physical location, whether that means they're on the phone. Some customers want to get on the phone with a call center, for example, or most customers, or growing segment of customers, want to interact with you in your digital channels. And that's where I think we have the kind of probably the most work to do as an industry, but certainly I think we can get there. And I think there's a lot of progress made so far.
Right. Okay. So that's encouraging, shall we say. Tyra, how do you sort of view that? Do you agree with Mark?
Yeah, I would say I agree with Mark. I mean, at the end of the day, the financial information and the data and the payment exists in all those ecosystems, right? So we're really not changing the way that retail works. What we're doing is trying to fundamentally bring more services, more financial services to the customer at the point of need. And so when we talk about embedded broadly, it really is taking a financial experience and taking it into a software platform, into a marketplace, into verticalized solutions and capabilities. It absolutely is possible, but there's also a lot of work to be done. It requires technology, APIs, risk and control frameworks, different go-to-market strategies. How do you think about brand? Mark was talking about the branch. It's a very different way to serve your customer when they're walking into a branch versus when you're doing it embedded into a different ecosystem. And so there are a lot of questions, I think, still for the industry to answer on what does this future state look like? But it's happening at pace, and we're seeing more banks play a larger role in that kind of evolution that's happening.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to share the results of the poll now. So thank you for those people who did, who participated, and probably not a big surprise that most people think the financial industry is behind overall. I think I would actually tend to agree with that. But maybe John, what are your thoughts on the general consensus is that it's possible, right? That we can provide a frictionless shopping experience. But maybe you could just comment on what you see as from the poll results there.
Well, thanks, Peter. Yeah, I think when you think about the consumer experience, that consumer is going from Amazon to our financial experiences. So, their expectations are that it's going to be, really similar to their experience on other places that have already figured out how to take all this friction out of the process. And so I think if you think about what retailers have done really well, I really think they have thought about this notion of distributed commerce.
Mm-hmm.
They've thought about, hey, I'm going to sell my stuff on my own property. I'm going to sell my stuff on Amazon. I'm going to sell my stuff on social media. If you go to Pinterest or Instagram or TikTok, these are places where people are buying things, and retailers have decided that they want to have a distributed commerce strategy. They've also done an amazing job with hyper personalization. They've used the data on your past transactions to personalize your experience. They brought other things into the experience that would, like a bundle of products that you might be interested in based on your past purchase behavior. So there's a high level of personalization. And then obviously, the whole checkout experience has been transformed over the last decade plus. I don't know about you. I use Shop Pay from Shopify, and
Yep.
It's a delightful experience. It pre-fills all my data, has all my payment credentials sitting right there, and it's a one-click checkout experience. And so that's the bar we're up against, I guess. And
Right.
The task at hand is to address each of those areas. We're doing some good work on that front, but there's still more work to do, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, really, you're talking about, embedded finance here when that's what's making some of this the frictionless moves in finance possible. And so maybe I want to talk a bit about dig in a little bit more into embedded finance, and maybe Tyra, I can go back to you. And you're really at Citizens, you're taking embedded finance really a step further. Tell us how you're thinking about it.
Yeah, so from a Citizens ecosystem perspective, we can stay with the example that Mark was providing on even small business. What we're really thinking about is, where do our customers interact and where do they need those services to be provided at point of need? And so those are things like software solutions that they use to run and manage their business. It can be payroll capabilities that they're using to start up their business and set up payroll. It's accounting. How do they think about the accounting sync and the flow of information, two directional within that? So what we've really been on this journey for is to think holistically around the customer. And there's also points of business formation, right? There's the point of where you first start your business. So how do you think about setting up the LLC, the payroll? How am I paying my suppliers? And then as you evolve and grow in that ecosystem, we want to make sure that we're not just bringing a full set of solutions, but also thinking of best of breed partners. And so this is where it gets really interesting, right? You've got partners in that ecosystem. Small businesses today are probably interacting with at least 10 providers, if not more, to run and to manage their business. Those are separate logins, separate data, separate needs to go into one solution and then marry information into the other. So back to John's comment too on sort of, the evolution of commerce. We're looking at what are our data assets and how do we think about marrying those data assets, particularly in this environment of open banking? Who are those select partners that meet those needs at critical points in their own evolution as a business? And then how do we have the technology and the sophistication to really marry that experience to what those customers are seeking? So it's not single sign-on, it's not a secondary login. It doesn't feel like you're waiting for a transaction to settle that you're imagining is happening in one platform and you're seeing it at another. We're really trying to paint the picture holistically. But that's obviously an evolution, and there's customer permissioning around data, and we're also very focused on risk and compliance and making sure that we're taking an approach that's very secure for our customers. The customers know how their data is being used, that they're giving us permission to enter into those ecosystems. So it's really sort of this journey of education and support.
Right, it's a really good point, because banking can never be just like buying a $50 product online, like a air purifier or something, that has no consequences, not really, there's no real regulations involved, or very little in that sort of transaction. Whereas in the financial services, we do have the compliance piece. We're talking about people's money, people's livelihoods here. So that is an added area of complexity. But I want to talk about onboarding. When it comes to onboarding, that is always going to be more friction in that place where you're going to get someone on into your bank or into your fintech or wherever for the first time. It just takes a little bit more a little bit more friction, because you don't know about this person. So maybe Mark, you can talk to us about how are you trying to make onboarding as seamless as possible at Citizens?
Yeah, and before I talk about that, I did want to add, you mentioned the regulatory component, and I think it's really important, because if you believe that banks are maybe a little bit behind on this experience thing, it has a lot to do, in my opinion, with the regulatory environment that banks have been operating in the last decade. Sharing financial information, open access, open data was kind of a scary thing to say even just 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so you can say the Amazons, et cetera, were all ahead in this space, but totally regulated in a very different way. Mm-hmm. And the acceptance of data being shared by customers has even evolved probably in just 5 years. Where now, because of this now economy that we operate in, customers want everything to happen right now for them. So they're more open to sharing of their financial data, which they were never, that never would have been the case even a decade ago. So right. I think it is an important point you brought up. In terms of onboarding, again, I think it's also kind of related to the environment that we've been operating in. So know your customer is very, very important in financial services and banking. Very strict anti-money laundering laws that guide how we onboard a customer from a KYC standpoint. And so, yeah, it takes a little bit longer to get live, let's say, in online banking or with a cash management tool for a larger commercial customer than it does to open up your Amazon account right now, which you could do in probably 30 seconds or less. The exciting thing, though, is in partnership with some of the fintech stuff happening out there right now, there are a lot of providers and a lot of solutions coming that can help banks and already are helping banks make that onboarding experience a lot more frictionless than it ever has been in the past. And so I think the future is looking pretty bright on this topic. What used to be done by paper, by most banks even 5 years ago, is now being done digitally. And there's now mechanisms through APIs, et cetera, to do, I'd say, much faster background checks on individuals and companies for that matter, including like instantaneous credit checks, for example, when someone's applying for a loan, either personally or through their small business. So I think a lot of exciting stuff has already come, but the acceleration of that, even through kind of AI production, will probably be pretty immense over the next kind of 1 to 3 years. So I'm really excited about where banks can kind of take the onboarding experience using all of the things I just talked about. I think the future is very bright there.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I think we have come a long way, right?
Yeah.
In the last 5 years. If you go back to pre-pandemic, it was a very different expectations, I think, too, from the consumer and the small business owner. And now there's more of an expectation, and we have come and we've improved that system. It's there is a lot of things that happen instantly, but maybe I want to switch to you, John, and talk about the end-to-end consumer financial shopping journey. When someone's out there, they're looking for a financial product. Give us a sense of how you think about their journey when they're going through that sort of financial shopping experience.
Yeah, I think the starting point and our kind of point of view on this is that, much like Amazon has evolved to have a first-party marketplace and a third-party marketplace, I think that's a trend that we see accelerating, such that a consumer can shop anywhere they want to. One's financial products shouldn't live on their own and operated channels in and of themselves. We have over 1,300 providers of products and distribution channels that enable this type of marketplace experience. And we think this is kind of the equivalent of distributed commerce and retail. But as Mark noted, the big difference here is that there's an approval process. You both have to want each other, if you will, and based on your profile, there may or may not be a product that's right for you, for that provider, or there may be many. So, I think the question that financial institutions are asking is, how do I qualify and personalize the experience to each person across all these different distribution points? And also, as Mark noted, like the big part of this is the data providers in open banking that are now enabling us to do this. At MoneyLion, this includes like real-time credit score data from the bureaus. This includes actual bank data from integration partners like Plaid, alternative data sources. We have one with Nova Credit for cash flow data. And then we have our own MoneyLion data that looks at all of the different interactions that person has had across our entire network over time. And we understand more about what they've applied for and what they've been approved for in the past. So the message that we send to our partners is, hey, it's possible to be precise in who you're targeting, but actually be everywhere, be wherever the consumer wants to transact. And then again, for the consumer, we can improve this process that we can go through by pre-filling all of their information in the application process. I don't know how annoying, if any of your experiences have been this, but how annoying it is to kind of go from provider to provider and have to put in all the same information we have all that information. There's no reason we shouldn't be pre-filling it just like ShopPay does. Only show you the offers that you qualify for, and enabling the financial equivalent of one-click checkout. And maybe it's two-click checkout or something like that, but that's the vision, is really taking that consumer experience and making it look like more retail.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because nothing frustrates me more where, you're even you may even be at an existing provider, and you're asking for a new product, and they're asking you information they have. And they don't, they're not using it as well. I think that's starting. I've noticed that's going away these days, but it still does happen from time to time where you want, if you have the information, or even if you can find the information just from a couple of fields. I think that's where that's where there's the consumer experience, or the small business owner experience, is really going to improve. So we're gonna go on to our polling question number 2. So if the audience, those of you who are here, could you take a quick read of that? Would love to kind of get your perspective of what areas is your financial institution focusing on. We've got a bunch of different options there. If you could just let us know how, what it is that you are really more focused on. You can choose more than one topic, and we'll go and review those in just a minute. But maybe taking it back to the citizens perspective here. What do you think are the advantages that banks have? And, when it comes to this sort of end-to-end experience, I mean, obviously there's going to be a lot of your customers that have multiple products with you guys. You're a relatively big bank with lots and lots of different business lines. But what do you think the advantages that you have potentially over others in the space?
So Peter, maybe I'll start.
Okay.
I think one of the things when you think about is the customer centricity. So what I mean by that is we've got multiple channels and multiple touch points to interact and engage with our customers. There is still a real desire for many people to walk into a branch and have personalized service and have that one-on-one interaction of somebody who's advising you on your financial journey. And while that's changing, and certainly demographics are shifting that, and younger populations are interacting much more on mobile, I think one of the advantages we have is we've got very talented, specialized people that both sit in the branch, but also can be relationship managers and bankers who can call you, who can have verticalized expertise. And so it's sort of this overlay of how digital engagement is really driving this outpaced growth in financial services, but with this relationship overlay. And I think that's something that's sometimes lost in retail, right? I don't have anyone that I can call to advise me on what's the best product in the Amazon marketplace. Like I'm relying on user reviews, and you don't always know how real those reviews are, and so on. So this idea of like a surround sound where you can bring in trusted people, trusted advisors, especially when in financial services, you're making some of the biggest decisions of your life. It can be financing a home, expanding your business, making payroll. These are things that have tremendous impact. And so I think that's a really unique advantage. And we're really thinking about that omni-channel, that sort of surround on it. I think the other thing is just comes back to trust. When banks pull, it's really that consumers continue to believe that they trust their banks, that there's high security in the way the banks operate. And as we talked about from a regulatory perspective too, you want to make sure that you're operating with somebody who's protecting you, protecting your data,
right,
and protecting some of the assets that are most important in your life. So, but again, you take that baseline of trust and security, and then you think like, how do you build the experiences on top of that enable you to really create a different set of like solution-oriented engagement or solution-oriented relationship management versus being a bank that's trying to sell you one-off products and services.
Right. I think that's a really good point there, Tara. So let's just look at the poll that we just concluded there. This is good. Personalized product offers is the number one. choice that people for their financial institution is focusing on from a customer experience perspective. And I think that's a really good thing. I think it sort of really points to a lot of what we're talking about here today, the personalization, which I think embedded finance is really helping to materialize. Okay, so let's maybe Mark, do you have anything to add from Tyra's?
Yeah, no, I thought it was really well stated by Tyra. I'm a little disappointed because I always buy the preferred referred Amazon product, so now I know I need to do a little bit more due diligence apparently. So I have to reevaluate a little bit on my end. But with that said, I would say the only other thing I would add to what Tyra said is, being a top 10 bank also affords us the opportunity where most vendors or fintechs want to talk to us. And so we do get kind of previews and access to unique and innovative solutions out there. And as a bank, no matter what size you are, you always have to evaluate, can you buy this? Can you build this? Can you partner? And I think one advantage that the banks have is we still do serve the largest percentage of customers in terms of financial services offered. And while we probably all predicted, 10 or 20 years ago that maybe branches would start disappearing as technology evolved, it turns out that even the largest banks in the country are continuing to add branches in key areas. And so I don't think that any of that has gone away yet. And so while there's a lot of innovation happening outside of the banks, I think most of those firms would love to have bank partners to accelerate their products into customers' hands. And so I think that's one key advantage that the banks still have in terms of the overall spectrum of customer experience. But I think John made a great point earlier. Customers are expecting us to be there in terms of best customer experience versus the other consumer offerings out there. So when they leave Amazon and come to Citizens application or mobile app, they want the same type of experience. And so we have to play at a high level in that space, or eventually we probably will lose our footing. Innovation happens all the time and the markets change completely and no one could predict it. And so banks have to keep up in this area, or I do think, if you fall asleep at the wheel on customer experience, and I'm not surprised to see onboarding and customer service come up high on those polls. If you fall behind in those areas for too long, certainly someone's going to come along from an innovation standpoint and take market share. So it's an advantage we have today, but it's not one we take for granted.
Right. That's a good point. Okay, so if you have a question for our esteemed panelists here, hit the Q&A button, and we'll get to those towards the end of the session here. So John, turning to you, maybe you could give us some example of how you are taking embedded finance, making it easier for banks and fintechs, and better for the consumer. Maybe you can just give us some examples there.
Sure, I'll make this quick. And maybe I'll just use our friends from Citizens since we have you here, and just kind of a hypothetical example of if Citizens wanted to acquire credit card customers across a variety of kind of owned and operated channels. This could be on places like SoFi or Chime or Bright, other different fintech applications. The way that we help institutions like Citizens, and many of them are using our hosted modeling capabilities, so that when you're on SoFi, Chime, Bright, Self, whoever it might be, our clients are hosting their decisioning model with MoneyLion. And then they can use that model combined with the data partnerships that I mentioned before, credit score, bank data, alternative data, MoneyLion data, to filter out pre-approved offers for those that meet their criteria, wherever they're shopping across the internet. And so again, for our financial institution partners, the ones that are providing the products, they're able to personalize that offer and filter who sees the offer, which obviously increases the conversion rate for them. But there's also a benefit in just reducing the cost and complexity of having to strike those data partnerships themselves. We do the deals and they just get access to those important data partners, so that it improves their efficiency and scalability. For the consumer, in addition to just the experience being seamless, nothing's worse than applying for a product and then getting rejected. So, they don't want that either. And so for our marketplace distribution partners, it's really important that there's a product that every consumer can get access to. And so it makes that consumer experience much more enjoyable as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as someone, I've been following consumer lending for a long time, and I think that being able to host the sort of the lending models, so the consumer doesn't get that rejection, because you're going to know with, I mean, it's not 100%, but you're going to know with a lot of confidence that this person that you're showing this offer to will be accepted. And I think that has been, I think, a game changer for the consumers, because they don't they have a better, no one wants to be rejected, as you say, and they'll blame the person that they're getting that rejection from. And I think this is being able to make a much better experience for the consumer by having them accept, I think it's been a great thing for consumers. So maybe, Tyra, maybe turn to you and talk about what are some of the examples of embedded finance that you are either implementing or looking at implementing at Citizens.
Yeah, so when we talk about embedded finance, there's, financial services being consumed out into software platforms, marketplaces, distributing sort of banks products. But we also think about embedded as creating more enriched experiences for our own customers. So some of the areas where we spend a lot of time working on with Mark and the team is think about the small business sort of accounting sync, payroll capabilities, acquiring, right? How do I set up my terminal, or am I, supporting e-com transactions only, or invoicing capabilities? And so we're really thinking about also embedding many of those, what we call kind of value add services, or services that sit in and around the financial core, into our own capabilities. So it looks and feels like it's Citizens. It's bringing best of breed providers and partners in, and really thinking about like the sum of one and one is three. It's the data assets that they can bring, it's specialization, it's thinking differently about front end design and onboarding, and even pre-population of applications. So that's where we're spending a lot of time, is really understanding, right? It's bi-directional. It's going out to brands, but it's also making sure that the point where you want to come in and your desire to come to a bank becomes even richer, because now instead of having to go to 10 different applications to serve my customer, I can do that all within our ecosystem. So we have this sort of bi-directional way that we think about embedding assets into our ecosystem, as well as embedding our ecosystem into different channels. And I think that becomes even more profound when you think about verticals.
Right.
How many restaurants today love toast, right? And that's their experience. And you're not gonna want that restaurant to now have to walk down the street to their local bank to ask and apply for a loan for working capital needs, when the data and the practice, right, the management of that solution and that software is all being distributed through Toast. So we're seeing it as just this real opportunity to take that, to John's point, bring these experiences together better. Think about what are still the criteria that the bank requires in that relationship, but then things don't feel so disparate. They're really much more engaged. The customers are much more delighted, and you feel like you have a proactive knowledge of their business. So you can make those lending decisions, you can make those working capital recommendations based on actual performance, and not because someone comes in their lunch break and says, "Hey, I've got this dire need, and can you serve me now?"
Right. I totally agree with that. The whole vertical SaaS movement, I think, is one that is changing, particularly the small business side of finance, profoundly, and in many cases for the better, as you said, Tyra, about the data that a vertical company like Toast will have, using all of that to make it a better experience, a better lending experience for the small business or the small restaurant owner. Anyway, I want to digress and just talk a little bit about a really interesting new partnership that you had, John, with a guy named Mr. Beast. And if you have a teenager, you no doubt you are very familiar with Mr. Beast. I have two teenagers, and they were really into Mr. Beast, but probably a couple of years ago now, that every single video he ever produced, he has become a major celebrity. Probably, I think probably the biggest celebrity on YouTube these days. And he has a lot of power with the Gen X crowd, and they look to him for recommendations of products. And so maybe, John, tell us a little bit about how this new partnership came to be and how it plays into your strategy at MoneyLion.
Well, this is a wide-ranging conversation. We're going from hosted models to
Yes, I know, exactly. To Mr. Beast.
Just a quick background of what we did. We actually sponsored his first set of content off of YouTube, which was the Beast games on Amazon Prime.
Ah, right.
Which was largely considered one of the most successful new shows to launch on Amazon this year. And he's got 800 million global subscribers. So
that's just amazing. That's amazing.
Out of every 10 people in the world,
right,
are subscribed to some content that he's producing. And this is a highly engaged audience. As you say, they trust him implicitly. And he's expanded into a bunch of different areas, including food and fast food and chocolate and things like that. But honestly, part of his content is anchored around finance. It's anchored around giving money away or challenges for money. So we felt like there was a good alignment there. And so we had an opportunity to partner with him. We were in the show and driving people to a MoneyLion experience where we were giving away like amounts of money to consumers that he was giving away in the show. And so we have his name, image, and likeness rights for all of 2025 in the app. So if you go in the app, you can see some of the experiences. But I think, like, to answer the question why we did it, like, I think the starting point is really to consider where people are learning about, younger people especially, are learning about finances today. And I think I would argue that in the past that would have been almost exclusively through a financial advisor or some other kind of literature out there. But now the next generation is learning about financial services on the same places where they're watching their friends, do dances and share memes, like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. And now there are financial influencers that are becoming like trusted sources of information on the topic. I was reading that TikTok published that a third of their users have come to the platform to find out about finances, and over a fifth of their users have discovered a new banking or finance product on TikTok. So it's happening.
Yep.
And we've tried to kind of create a TikTok-like experience in MoneyLion where we're kind of making financial services fun, approachable, engaging, a little less scary than maybe the traditional ways of doing it, by educating them about their finances in kind of plain language, using influencers, and then having the right product right there from either ourselves or from a third party to transact when they're ready. But the results of this program with him have been astounding. Actually, we've had millions of new accounts open as a result of this. We saw a triple-digit increase in daily active users on the platform. People coming back to learn more, find more information, get more engaged, which gives us a substantial opportunity to cross-sell and upsell our existing customers or these new customers with products from ourselves or third parties. Right. So to us, it's been a home run and a really great model for us to consider going forward as well.
Yeah, I think you guys have done a really great job. And if you subscribe to the MoneyLion YouTube channel, TikTok, they do. I think you guys have more subscribers than just about any other fintech or bank, I believe. You've got millions of subscribers that are doing, and you make it fun. And I think that's what I mean. I look at I teach my kids financial literacy, but they'll come back to me. They'll come back to me with questions that they had by watching a TikTok video or an Instagram video or whatever. So it's a great way to reach this new demographic. But anyway, I want to move on to our last polling question, and that is, what barriers are you encountering in personalizing product offers in digital channels to increase conversion rates? So what are the things that are stopping your conversion rate from being better? And you see there's lots of different options there: the lack of technology capabilities and insufficient customer data. So we will go and let that poll run for a little bit here, but in the meantime, let's move on to our next question, and that is, let's talk about open banking. We've touched on it, certainly with the data piece. So maybe I'll open up to anybody. How will the growing adoption of open banking further support this transformation that we're experiencing with embedded finance? Who wants to take that?
I'll jump in since it's good timing, since we just announced at Citizens today our first open banking API launch as of today.
Oh, nice!
So exciting breaking news to share on this podcast. But I think it's going to accelerate, Peter, all of the progress items that we just talked about. So it's going to take banking to kind of new heights from a customer experience standpoint, and be able to integrate in a lot more channels than ever before. And I will just add that, what John just talked about, one, profound. Two, I had to ask at dinner the other night who Mr. Beast was, so that just kind of makes me feel old now. But I would say what John talked about in terms of engagement, and open banking is going to be part of the engagement piece here.
Sure.
Engagement is going to win the day, and aren't all consumer experiences now about engaging with the customer in a much bigger, more robust manner? What young people are talking about today is about the experience. Even when you see new branches in banking as kind of a very, not traditional thing to talk about from an experience standpoint, but look at how they're being created. Much more open space, much more experience driven. Same thing with the kind of mobile apps in banking, websites as well. It's all about engagement. And so a lot of what Tyra talked about, and this is where open banking comes into play, is about how can we engage with our customers in more ways outside of traditional banking case uses. And I think, John's example is just profound as well, because I talked earlier about how banks could be disrupted or disintermediated. And it's through engagement in new channels, potentially through younger generations over time, if they don't keep up with kind of some of the stuff we've talked about today. So I think engagement wins the day. And I think open banking is a way to get there faster.
That's a really good point. And that's really looking at the poll results here. It's limited access, integration to credit and bank data as one of the barriers. And so that's really talking about access to open banking, really, right there. And I think that, we are going to make a lot of progress. And we have made progress, but I think a lot of things we've talked about here today demonstrate that we still have a ways to go. Anyway, let's go now to some audience questions. So if you have a question for our panelists, hit the Q&A button. We are going to get into that right now. Okay, so here's one that for you, John. Can you expand on what you have shared on MoneyLion's partnership with Mr. Beast and talk about the broader content strategy you have to increase customer engagement with your MoneyLion app?
Well, yes. I mean, you mentioned this. We've already been publishing content on all those channels that I described: TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and we have almost 4 million subscribers on TikTok. And we're doing it in a really irreverent way. You can see some of the content categories that we've built out. It's making it fun, approachable, a little less serious, bringing in other personalities and influencers into that experience. And then we're bringing all that content to the app because our whole strategy is content and commerce. We need that engagement. And I think this is a big opportunity for financial services companies as well, is that engagement plus the products and the experience of managing your accounts all kind of baked into one. So if you go to MoneyLion, it feels like a TikTok feed. And then we have the products. We're just mining all that data about what you're interacting with, and then we're showing you the right products that match what your interests are, both on MoneyLion and then across our network as well. And then again, we're using all that intelligence that I described before to surface the right product to you. But I think that's the real opportunity is not just be a transactional platform, but actually merge content that is engaging, that can be educational, that can bring people into the fold, and then use that as a mechanism to deepen your partnership and your engagement with that customer.
Right. And with what embedded finance brings, you're able to offer a wider range of products, right? With depending on what their interest is, you can offer, as you said, as Tyra said before, it can be a partnered experience where you might be offering somebody else's product, but they're staying within your ecosystem. And I think that's the important piece. Okay. Next question. This is for Tyra or Mark. As you enrich your small business financial hub experience, what are the key product categories that you are focusing on, whether via first party or third party products? Just kind of what I was talking about.
So, Peter, I would say on that one, just starting off, I mean, core to us is still the banking, the transaction, bank account information, all of that is critical, but we're really thinking more dynamically around data and insights. So drawing those insights in for those business customers, whether that's data on peers, data on competitors, data on geographic location, things that could impact their business that might be coming, really looking at that data and insights. And then as I was talking about that extension of value chain, it's all of the surround of making sure that you can immediately invoice a customer. The pay by link is very powerful for a small business customer, especially think about services-based businesses. You're not walking around with a terminal. You're making sure that when I'm done, completing my service, that I can email you and I can get paid quickly. And so the seamlessness of capabilities like that then broaden into payroll, work, employee workforce management, some of the workflow approval pieces as well. We're really sort of surrounding that what we call kind of traditional set, but we want to be the point of entry. We want to be this command center. And I love John's point on content too. I think that's always this interesting line for financial institutions, because you want to be this intersection very much of content and commerce, but you also have to make sure it's the right content and that you're patrolling that content to some degree so that you're giving the right advice to the customers that you're serving. And I wonder if that doesn't almost become part of the challenge too, which is there's so much content and so many different channels coming from so many different sources. Is there a responsibility or an opportunity for banks to really be kind of filtering through some of that and think about what is trusted content?
Yeah, I think there is.
John, we can maybe extrapolate more on that, but that would be one of the things I would think through too, because there's a lot of misinformation. And so I think, Peter, there's this line as we're thinking about how we're building the hub, and then the content that comes in and how you dynamically, as Mark was talking about, create these experiences that enrich your customers' lives. That's like the trifecta. Getting that right in some way, I think, really opens the aperture of what people can do, but it isn't easy.
Right.
So
I think it's interesting. I think that's why I've seen a lot of banks stand up their own production studios. I've seen chief content officers be a role, so that you can curate the very best of what you create, and also bring in trusted sources. So it truly is that curated experience. You don't want the Wild West
Mhm.
of finance for all the reasons that Mark pointed out earlier on the compliance side too. So that's the trend I see happening.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it's still a big opportunity for financial institutions to kind of play, let's call it in the non-traditional media spaces in a bigger way. And I think we've largely been a bit uncomfortable doing that thus far. One, because our customers just weren't demanding it in the past, because it was the younger generation. The younger generation is now grown up, and now they have bank accounts. And so, 10 years ago, you didn't have to kind of go and market on Facebook, for example, or whatever, whatever platform you say, because maybe most of the users were not using financial institutions. But today they are. And I think, John, sounds like where John is kind of cutting edge in some of that content curation. I think the banks, we market in so many different ways to so many different people, and we do it in a curated fashions. But I think in social media forums, most of the larger traditional financial institutions aren't playing as big in some of the TikToks of the world, as one example. But an opportunity for us to kind of do more of that in the future, because I think, John, you highlighted it best. It's a very robust global e-commerce platform. I mean, most small businesses, as one example, are actually selling product on TikTok. And so if I'm only marketing social media about all of the great things that Citizens is doing on LinkedIn, but most small business users are actually sitting on TikTok, not on LinkedIn, all the likes in the world from my colleagues doesn't attract the new customer in some of these other forums. And so, it is something that's really top of mind for me. And Tyra and I have talked about this a bit in the past as well. It's just about, how do we, whether it's small business, consumer, otherwise, we need to make sure that we are going to where the customers are living. And that might not be always now through TV commercials, for example. The Mr. Beast example, I think, is just a brilliant one to bring up, because you tapped a whole new market for yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we're running out of time here, so I want to close with a forward-looking question here. I want to talk about the future. And when you're looking at embedded finance, is there a final end state where we're going to get to? I'd like to hear from each of you. Maybe Tyra, you can go first.
I think it's a great question. It's what I've been asked before. I think it's an evolution, to be honest with you. I think that the final end state might be that you almost can't distinguish the brand from the financial institution, or vice versa. There's really this merging of how customers are served. But again, people are going to want to be served in different ways. We talked about demographics. We talked about aging. We talked about so many different components in this. So I think the more you can connect the two, which means to me that you can go into a bank branch and you can have a very rich set of experiences, because you want hyper personalization versus you want to do something on your mobile device versus you want to be out in a brand or in Target or Walmart and experiencing services differently because they might know you or have data on you in a different way. I think all of those lines are going to kind of get blurred, but hopefully the experience is paramount and sort of rises to the top.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, Mark.
Yeah, I would say so. From a banking standpoint, I think Tyra said it best. We want to have a command center of sorts for people to kind of operate their daily lives. So I'll use the business example because it's probably the easiest one to relate to. I want a small business owner to be able to log into Citizens banking platform and basically do everything they need to do to run their business that day, at least from a kind of all things financial oriented, including running payroll, by the way. And then from the outside world, where Tyra and our team is going is I want Citizens brand to be out there in some of the better consumer-oriented experiences, so that when customers are checking out from somewhere, they can have a personalized offer from Citizens. Maybe we're financing their purchase, maybe they're opening a new account with us, maybe they're getting a credit card from us, and I think it comes back to having the right partners. And obviously, as you go down that path, you need to pick partners pretty selectively, because your brands can become pretty commingled very quickly. But I think it's a really exciting space to go, is to kind of take banking to where the customers are from a quote unquote shopping experience, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, John, you have the last word.
Well, I'll just build on Mark's point. I think that is, from a consumer perspective, a consumer finance perspective, I really believe in some of the things we talked about, the content and commerce combination. I believe that you'll see more banks, more financial institutions invest in more engaging content. So they're not just a transaction platform in their digital experience. I think you'll see consumers being able to have a financial services digital passport, if you will, that allows them to transact across all apps and all digital experiences, um, that will help them with that personalization as well, because it's taking into account their behavior across all the different experiences that they're engaging in. And then that gives you this opportunity, gives us all this opportunity to anticipate people's needs, to predict what they might be in the market for based on all the data we've collected on them and all the information that we know about them. And I think that's a interesting kind of end state to think through, is how do we actually anticipate somebody's needs and get in front of what they might need before they even know it.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that's kind of what Netflix and Amazon do, right? That's with all the data they've had. So anyway, we'll have to leave it there. Really interesting discussion. Thank you so much, Tyra, Mark, John. Thank you, Engine by MoneyLion, for making this series possible, and of course, thank you to everybody who tuned in. Have a great afternoon, everybody.